process of masking allows us to take a layer and use it as a mask to view an animation or view the contents of another layer beneath it only through the non-transparent area of that mask. I have here an animation of two layers. The back layer is simply the static window that I've drawn. The top layer here is a ball classic animation. So I have a ball here that moves left to right. I want to see the ball only through the window. So one option is I could put the ball behind here, or behind the window. I could delete the area of the frames, and I could draw in the rest of the area here as white, and we would see the animation simply occur underneath these knocked out areas of the windows. But there's actually a better way to do that, and that's with a mask. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to copy my windows. I'm going to get just the fills here. Copy those, and I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to paste in place those fills. Now when I paste in place, you'll notice that it overlaps a little bit, and we'll see later how to fix this if you want it to be just perfect. I'm going to move this layer up to the top, and then I'm going to name it Mask. Now as we can see, if we turn everything else off, there is my mask. It's just the fills from that window frame. I'll turn the window frame on underneath. Notice the fills kind of overlap the strokes a little bit, and I'll show you how to fix that. And then we have our ball animation. Now at this point, the ball is kind of sandwiched between those two layers with the window. What I'm going to do is right click on this mask layer and choose from the pop-up menu Mask. That will create it as a mask layer, and it indents the layer underneath of it. So this is the layer that is being masked by our mask. You notice the ball kind of disappeared there. I now only see the ball through the contents of that layer. In fact, let me turn this bottom window off. Notice the layer, the contents of the layer is not visible. Let me just test this. And you can now see the animation is only visible through our mask. Now again, just to demonstrate that the mask is not visible, let me just change these colors. And I'll test it again. So we're only seeing that underlying layer, and we're seeing the animation only occur within the mask area. So we're like looking through a keyhole. Now if I wanted to fix, let me run this again. If you look really carefully, you might see the ball over top of the lines, our strokes, because our masks will overlap those strokes a little bit. So here's how I would fix that. I would come into the window, and we can just copy this frame. And I'm going to add a new layer above the mask, and I'm going to paste the frame. And then finally, I'm just going to get rid of these fills. And I might want to hide this layer here so I see that they're actually being deleted. And all I'm left with is just the strokes. And now let's extend this layer down. And I might just call this window frame. And now the strokes of our window frames are on top of our ball, and we don't see the ball actually going through the frames themselves or through the strokes. Let's look at another example. So here's a scene where somebody's looking out an airplane window, and I've added a goose animation here using our familiar Goose movie clip, and I'm going to animate it through past the window. Now if I just test this movie at this point, we'll see that the goose doesn't fly in the window, it's flying inside the plane. So we want to have this goose only appear in the area of the window. So using the technique we just looked at, I'm going to select the fill of the window. I'm going to add a new layer. Drag this layer to the top. I'm going to call it mask. And I'm going to paste in place the fill that I copied. Now notice again, it intruded a little bit on that stroke. So it's going into the center of the stroke. That's just the nature of working with vector graphics. The area is defined for the fill, and then we have the stroke area, which is defined, and a stroke width, which ends up extending a little bit into the fill. And that's why this is happening. Okay, so I'm going to take this mask, and I'm simply going to right click and make this a mask layer. The goose indents under it, so it's the area that's being masked. And now if I test my movie, we see the goose flying outside the plane in the window. But notice, if you look really carefully, the stroke here, or the seal of the window, the goose is flying between the plane and that seal. And that's just not quite right. So I want to fix that. So again, I'm going to come down to my interior, and here I'm going to get just that stroke. I'm going to copy it. Let's add another layer above. And I'm going to paste that in place. And now, if we test our movie, the goose is no longer flying inside the seal of the window. So here's another example. I have a old television, photograph of an old television on a black stage. And then I have some credits that I've created as a movie clip. So this would be the end of a movie. Say the end, we want the credits to appear, and I want to have these credits scroll up through the television. So I've created a classic tween to do that. 2 keyframes. So on the last keyframe here, the credits are above the TV screen, and then on the first frame they start below. And we just do the classic tween animation between that. Well, the problem is, if I were to play this, the credits would just simply be appearing atop the image of our television, rather than looking like they're part of the TV screen. So to fix that, let's add a layer. And I might here use the pen tool, or I could use a rounded rectangle. So I'm going to draw a rounded rectangle on this layer. Something kind of like that. And that now becomes my mask. Let's name this TV screen mask. I'm going to right click and make it a mask. And now when I test my movie, the credits appear on the screen. Here's another example. I've created a banner, and in Photoshop I created this image of these 5 dogs, brought it in, and then I laid 2 of them side by side, so they're duplicated here. Where the tail end of this dog is cut off, it's actually appearing at the end of my image. So my image actually ends about here. Again, it's duplicated, and you can see the tail end over here. I then create an animation with the movie clip here on the left hand side, and then on the keyframe I basically bring it back to where it's going to start with the same frame, and I actually, in doing this, created an extra frame. In fact, let me just go ahead and redo this animation so you can see how this was done. So I'm going to remove my frames. I'm going to remove the tween, and I'm going to come out 1 extra frame, and I'm going to insert a keyframe here. I'm going to drag a ruler guide and I'm going to take it just to the edge of this Rottie's ear. This was actually my Rottie when she was a puppy. And now in this frame, this last keyframe, I'm going to hold down the Shift key, and now in this last frame I'm going to unlock the layer, grab the movie clip, and hold down the Shift key. I'm going to move it down. You can actually see where that next layer starts. So if I bring it right to that edge, that should basically duplicate. And we'll see the left ear comes back to where that ruler guide is. I might just nudge it one frame. Now that's going to cause a little pause here in that this frame is the same as my first frame. So what I'm going to do is come to the frame before it. Actually, let's create a motion tween here first. Create a classic tween. I'm going to come to the frame before this, so it's not quite to that left edge, and I'm going to convert this to a keyframe. And then I'm going to get rid of this last frame. Okay, so I now have this animation, and I have two other layers here of, this is an animation of a dog running across the stage at the bottom. And the third one here, layer 5, is actually a little red ball that I used a class or a motion tween on to have this ball move up and down or bounce across the stage. Let me just run this at this point so you can see the animation. So we have our scrolling banner. Scrolls very smoothly, and the animation loops, so we don't see the banner pause where it's got two frames that are the same. Now I want to use a mask to make this even a little more impressive. I'm going to add a new layer, and on this layer, I'm going to lock my other layers here. On this layer, I'm going to type the word dogs, and let's get a larger font, and I'm going to choose something a little bit narrower and bolder. I'm going to use a font called Impact. Stretch this out just a little bit so that the word dogs is kind of encompassing all of my dogs. And I might even bring the letter spacing in a little bit tighter. And that's going to be our mask. Let's make this a mask. And now let's test the movie. So now we're seeing the banner through the word dogs, but it's kind of busy. It gets lost a little bit. It's kind of hard to read the text. So let's fix that. I'm going to add another layer. I'm going to copy my frame from the mask, and I'm going to paste it in this new layer. So now I have the word dogs. I'm going to unlock that layer. I don't want this to be a mask. I'm going to turn the mask feature off. So I still have my dog's mask, but this now is just the same information from the mask layer on a normal layer, on a content layer. I'm going to take this text of the dogs, go to Modify. I'm going to break apart twice. That will give me shapes. And now I'm going to take a white stroke, and I'm going to add a stroke around the word dogs. I'm going to hide everything here. I'm going to delete the fill. So I'm left with just the stroke. And I do something else that can be kind of cool. I'm going to select all of that, turn it into a movie clip. I'm going to call it MC Dog Title. And since it's a movie clip, I can now apply a filter. I'm going to apply a little drop shadow. I'm going to turn my dogs back on so you can see this. And I get a little drop shadow inside the white stroke. We're not going to see it on the outside down here at the bottom because that's going to be black. And I'm just going to extend this out just a little bit. And let's set the quality to high. Actually, I don't like that as well. Let's go back to low. All right, so now let's test our movie. And there is our banner inside the text of the word dogs. And got a little drop shadow at the upper left behind the stroke of the dogs. Just kind of makes it look a little more three-dimensional. One more example here is we can actually animate the mask itself and have the layer underneath be static. So I have here a black stage, and that's sort of the key to this effect. I've got a black stage, and then I created some text with a yellow background on a layer. So I'm going to add a new layer. I'm going to name this mask, and in my library I have a little red ball. I called it Spot. And we're going to do an animation with Spot here. I'm going to make this as a motion tween. So I'm going to right click on the ball and choose Create Motion Tween. And then since my playhead's down here at the end, I want this spot to kind of come over here off the edge of the stage. I'm going to move my playhead and then take my movie clip and move it up a little bit. Let's take the playhead over here. I'm going to move it down slightly. And let's test our animation. Oh, before I do that, let's make this a mask. And you can see the effect as I scrub through his playhead. We have the spotlight highlighting the word South Mountain. Lots of things we can do with Mask. I would invite you to spend some time playing around with Mask and trying to duplicate some of the effects I've just demonstrated.